everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Bullish or Bearish. I'm Angela Chu from Success Option Group, and I'm here with my brother Tony. And we're here to bring you another great episode where we talk an interesting financial topic and give you both sides of the story so you can really make a decision that's right for you.
Yep. Like Angela said, welcome back. And it really gets at how do you make decisions and how, knowing about both sides, right? And both sides of the argument. And the topic we're going to talk about today is this whole idea of being a specialist versus being a generalist. So I'm taking the side of the generalist. So I think it's a lot better to have, in the grand scheme of life, you're going to need to have skills and you're going to need to be able to react to any kind of situation that occurs. And this is especially in the financial markets, in the stock markets, and in investments in general, where life happens and you're not necessarily sure what you're going to do. So you need to have some knowledge. You need to have an idea of what are your options.
Okay, so that's great that you're saying that you should have some knowledge of all your options. The problem is that having some knowledge of all your options does not mean that you actually know what you should be doing or what the right answer is or what the right decision is. Because it's kind of like if you know, let's say 5% of 20 different topics, you are going to be wrong 95% of the time on all of those topics. However, if you are a specialist and you actually know your stuff for at least two of those topics, then you'll be 95% right on both of those topics, while you'll still be maybe 95% wrong on the other ones. But at least in two different areas, you know that you can make the right decision, especially if you're picking specific financial investments that you want to invest in.
Okay, so I think what I'm coming from is being a specialist is how you get your foot in the door, right? This is how you get started, right? And when we talk specifically about some of the stuff we talk about in workshops, like options trading, right? You start off with 1-2 strategies, right? And you get your foot in the door. The problem I see is being a specialist, and if you only know those 1 or 2 strategies, there's this old saying, it's like, if you only know how to use a hammer, that's the only tool you know how to use, everything looks like a nail, right? And you're just using that hammer, or you're using that one strategy over and over again. And it's not always going to work, especially in the options market, in the investment that we're talking about. That's not always the best solution, right? So if you don't even know about all these things and everything looks like a nail, that's what you're going to use. You're going to use your hammer, right?
Okay, so that's a hilarious analogy to make. But the thing is that I'm going to use your analogy. Your hammer thing, okay, your hammer can actually be a multi-purpose tool. You can use it for a lot of things other than using it for just nails. So the thing is that it's the same thing with when we talk about being a specialist. A specialist doesn't mean that you only specialize in one thing. It just means that everything that you work on, you actually become an expert in. So you could start with one thing, and when you become your stuff on that, you add another one. It's not like knowing a little bit about every little thing. It's about choosing to make sure you know well one thing, then start the next thing and know well that thing. And you can be a specialist in a type of strategies, a set of strategies. It doesn't have to be just one thing. So you can actually choose from like he said, learning a little bit about everything, but then you choose which ones you want to specialize so that you have a plan that works for you.
So the issue with what you're saying, though, is that, how do you know when you know enough about something, right? So then developing that specialist in a certain area, developing that in-depth knowledge where you can be successful, right? That requires amount of practice and requires skill, right? And let me use another analogy here, right? So my background is in engineering, right? So I'm a chemical engineer by trade, and now I do finance and we do financial education. But I don't do anything with chemical engineering. I don't do anything with chemistry, right? My job when I was in corporate was more about troubleshooting. And it's this whole idea of kind of knowing where to go for my knowledge, right? And how to troubleshoot, how to break the problem up into bite-sized chunks, right? And if you're just thinking, oh, how do I chemistry my way out of this problem? Or how do I get myself out of this problem? You kind of miss the bigger picture at times because you're just focused. You have your blinders on and you're focused on what you're trying to do.
Okay, so that works when you're talking about it that way. But what I'm talking about is like when you're trying to make a plan for, let's say, what we talk about a lot in our workshops is making a plan for how you want to trade options, how you want to make money in the stock market. A lot of people just need to figure out what their plan is going to be and be able to repeat that plan like over and over again with a good amount of success. The thing is that not everybody has the time to want to become very knowledgeable about every single topic. So what they want is something that will work for them and becoming a specialist in that in a way that works for them. For instance, like I always like try to talk to my new students and I'm like, you need to really know something that's like a low risk strategy so that you don't have to worry about losing money and you can just like repeatedly make money. Even if it's only like the ROI, the return is maybe not as much as the other strategies, but it's something that's consistent, something that's pretty secure, pretty safe, low risk. I always say that you need to specialize at least in a couple things like this so that you have a solid foundation, something to fall back on. It's great to know a million different strategies, but if you can't do any of them like well, then can you actually use it? Does it actually work for you?
So now, as we were talking, I came up with one more analogy here, right? So like you're a sports player, like a professional sports player. You do start off with like usually one position. You're really good at your position. That way you can get to this higher level. But the idea is that, especially like, let's say baseball, you need to be able to play multiple positions because that will increase the longevity of your life, right? As a professional athlete. So you'll be able to since you can move around to different positions, you're going to be able to stay longer, make more money, right? Make more money, which is what we're all talking about, especially, that's the goal, right? Make more money in the market. So I think specialist is good to get your foot wet or get your feet into the door, right? Get your feet into the door, get into that market. But then afterwards, you need to realize that for longevity in the stock market is not, you can't just focus on one thing for the whole duration. You need to branch out. You need to play multiple positions. You need to learn multiple strategies.
So really, I feel like what we're talking about is the same thing, because it's not like I disagree with the idea of learning more, because I always think that more education never hurts. All right. Knowing more never hurts. But like my brother just said, I believe very strongly that the first thing you need to do when you're just starting out, when you're a beginner, is really find one thing that you want to know thoroughly, because that gives you your foundation to build upon. If you have that foundation to build upon, then you can decide, well, okay, I have this foundation. What am I weak in? What do I need to know next? That's when you can start thinking, okay, well, what's the next thing I want to specialize in? Or like you use some of that generalist knowledge first, saying, okay, well, what is out there? Then you choose, okay, what's the next thing I'm going to specialize in? You specialize and know how to do that. Then you go back to the generalist and be like, okay, now what's the next thing I want to learn more about? It's not like you have to stay in one thing all the time. You can go back and forth. And I think that's really what it boils down to, is like, really what you need to do is you need to be flexible. You need to be able to make decisions that are right for you. And that takes education.
Yep. So make sure you hit the like, hit the subscribe, check out some of our prior videos. But what we're really getting at is, how do you create that plan? How do you figure out what your first specialization would be, right? And that's what we're here for, right? So make sure you sign up for our workshop, sign up for a private consult, and we'll get you on that path.